Jay's Alexis, where also this evening, Congress voting to avert a rail strike many had predicted would have a huge negative effect on the economy. We'll get the latest on that as well. Right now, though, it is 7:32, and joining me live on WWJ this evening is Dave Dulio, professor of political science and director of civic engagement at Oakland University. How are you? It's so good to hear from you.
I'm well, Aaron. How are you? Thanks for having me.
Every time something like this, I always go to you because you are so good at explaining certain political things so that people can understand. And I'm reading today that Michigan is poised to replace Iowa as the early Democratic presidential state. And that's kind of confusing if you're not really aware of how that works. Can you explain that, Dave?
Sure. How much time do we have? Right? 'Cause this is one of those things that we could talk for hours about this, right? But the long and the short of it is that starting next year in late January, early February, we will start the process of nominating candidates for President of the United States, right? We'll go through the presidential primary season. And for decades and decades, the state of Iowa has had a privileged position as the number one state. It was going first for roughly 50 years. And that's going to change in part because of some trouble that the state of Iowa had last time in its process, but also because I think the Democratic Party is really where this is coming from. They're looking to shake things up a little bit, and Michigan for them is a very attractive state to be one of those first states to have its presidential primary. Michigan's probably not going to be the first, but it'll be within the first three or four. That's at least the way it's shaping up right now.
Why is Michigan so one of these like kind of lucrative things, lucrative states to make this decision surrounding?
Well, it's an attractive state, I think, for Democrats because it is it's in the Midwest. It's a very important state when it comes to the general election, right? So building support, making inroads here in Michigan for those candidates is really important. But in addition, it's a bit more diverse than Iowa and New Hampshire. Certainly Iowa, as we talked about, New Hampshire, another one of those early states. And I think it's got a pretty good labor presence in terms of unions and manufacturing, a key constituency, at least in the past, for Democrats. So I think it checks a lot of boxes for the Democratic Party.
What does this mean for the Republicans? And if you're just joining me on WWJ this evening, on the phone with us this evening is Professor of Political Science and Director of Civic Engagement at Oakland University, Dave Dulio. How does this affect the GOP moving forward?
Well, this is where it gets kind of tricky because while Michigan could, and it's not a done deal yet, pass a law that would say this is when our presidential primary is going to be. Call it the second week in February. I'm not sure if that'll be the final date, but let's, for sake of argument, say that's what it is. Michigan can say that, but the national parties, both the Democrats and the Republicans, have internal party rules that set timelines for these things to happen. And it seems from all the discussion coming out of Washington that the Democrats are poised to, as we've been talking about, change their calendar so that Michigan would be in those early group of states. Well, as it stands now, if Michigan had a primary that early, it would actually violate the rules of the Republican National Committee, which could put Republicans in Michigan into a sticky situation. And there's so much that's going to have to happen before any of this gets finalized, right? That, I'm sure, will work itself out.
If you're just joining me on WWJ this Thursday evening, on the phone with me, Dave Dulio, professor of political science and director of civic engagement at Oakland University. It's to my understanding that while President Joe Biden was just here in the state, he kind of gave the thumbs up for this to actually take place.
That's the report that I'm reading as well, that he sort of gave his blessing, if you will, to the idea that Michigan would be in that early group of states, which is certainly important when we're talking about the leader of the Democratic Party and somebody who's got influence, no doubt, over what happens in the Democratic National Committee, and it'll all be taken up by some obscure group called the Democratic National Committee Rules and Bylaws Committee that will make that formal recommendation for the Democrats in the next couple of weeks, I guess.
Next couple of weeks. So this could pretty much go down rather quickly then. And then how long would it take to put the wheels in motion after it's decided?
Boy, that's a good question. I think there's no question that if the Democratic National Committee gave its blessing to this and put Michigan in that first group of states, the state government would likely have to take some action, and I would imagine that would wait until the new year, when Democrats have majorities in both the State House and Senate coming up, plus, of course, Governor Whitmer in the governor's mansion, to sort of make that go as smoothly as possible.
Now, if we're looking like countrywide, is there another state that would be the first, say, on the West Coast, and then we would be like the leading contender in the Midwest? Is that how that works?
Not necessarily, right? But there are the way it's shaping up for Democrats is the first group of 4 states is likely to include New Hampshire, South Carolina, Nevada, and Michigan, not in necessarily that order. But so you do have a bit of geographic diversity there with, of course, New Hampshire in the Northeast, South Carolina in the South, Nevada in the West, and Michigan here in the Midwest. Not necessarily planned that way at the beginning of all this, but I think that does provide some kind of nice geographic balance for sure.
Yeah, the timing and everything, it's just it seems like all of the pieces are falling where they need to be for this to happen, because the Democrats flipping the Michigan legislature, Governor Gretchen Whitmer winning re-election, it's kind of just basically set in stone per se.
Well, and I think that's the Democratic candidate's strong showing last month, I think really revved the engine on this, and I think that's really maybe what sealed the deal, if you will. And it's hard to overstate the importance of this, and hard to overstate the change that's going to come with this for the state of Michigan. It is we're going to be poised to have an enormous impact on who the candidates are going to be who end up running in the general election for president of the United States. We're going to have a real powerful position in 2024 to choose, if it turns out the way I think it will, to choose the Republican nominee and the Democratic nominee. And I come to that one last because right now many are assuming that President Biden is going to run again, unchallenged. But if he doesn't, then it's going to be a battle royal in the Democratic Party as well as in the Republican Party. Absolutely fascinating. Dave Dulio, Professor of Political Science and Director of Civic Engagement, Oakland University. Thank you so much for your time. I really appreciate it. Thank you, Aaron. Well, we'll have to see how that all pans out. And, of course, if anything does come out of it, we will have all of that information right here on WWJ News Radio 950. And